mbokk yi ñu ngi leen di nuyu benn yoon fii ci Africa TV ñëwaat mbégte dellusiwaat tey ci suba si la comme ni ñu koy defee saa su ne bu waxtu bi jotee mbégte lay doon saa su ne ñu ñëw ànd ak yéen ci li nga xamante ne mooy ci Good Morning Africa programme bi comme ni ñu koy defee ñëw digtal leen suñu ay xibaar waaye tamit waxtaan ci ak suñu ay gan ak foos ak mbir yu am solo ci tolluwaay ci réew mi ak tamit xew-xew ci biir réew mi su ko defee fu ngeen mënta nekk ci biir réew mi ñu ngi leen di ziar ba biti réew di rafetlu baax a baax ñu ngeen di ànd ak ñun saa su ne dooree ko Monday ba Friday bu waxtu bi jotee ci programme bi ñu ngi ko rafetlu bu baax a baax di leen wax jërë ngeen jëfati tey tamit incha allah ci ponk yi nañ ci waxtaan suñuy xibaar yi indi leen ci lu am solo dana ci bokk National Assembly bi xam ngeen ne député yi dellusiwaat nañ ci pencum ndaw réew mi continuer di waxtaan ak ñenn ci jëwrin yi ci biir réew mi ci ay doxalin li nga xamante ne mu ngi xew ci nguur gi ak tamit ci réew mi ci fànn yu am solo daanaka laaj ak tontu seen diggante jamono ji loolu moo nekk di am foofu ci National Assembly of course ak yeneen taxawaay nañ ci gën a yaatal bu baax ci biir xibaar yi nañ tamit wax ci wàllum liggéey ak tamit jafe-jafe yi nga xamante ne liggéeykat yi dañ koy dund fu ne ci àdduna si waaye surtout ci réew mi ndax am na report bi nga xamante ne dafa dal di génn pour wax ci loolu ci li aju ci wàllu mbas mi jafe-jafe yu mu gën a yokku ci liggéey bi ak tamit ci doxalin yu bari ci nit ñi ñu nekkee loolu tamit nañ ci addu ci li nga xamante ne mooy ci jotaay bi nañ ci toftal yeneen incha allah amaana leneen li surprise lay doon ci kanam tuuti ñu yaatal ko bu baax a baax. Well, viewers, again, welcome to the of course, Thursday's edition of the Good Morning Africa program right here on Africa TV. And once again, wherever you are, thank you so very much for joining us. And yeah, it's Thursday, the 17th of June, 2021. So we have some very interesting lineup this morning. We will, of course, talk matters of the National Assembly proceedings or sittings as resumed. So we will, of course, be bringing you some details from what has been discussed at the National Assembly yesterday. And yeah, we will also talk about this National Labour Day. Of course, you know the COVID-19 impact and all does have disrupted many jobs and works of different people around the world. So the impact has been felt by many or millions of people around the world. So of course, also bring you a report on that. We'll also talk about the, you know, some other very important things, as always we do in this program. So once again, thank you so very much for joining us. And we now go straight to the program and begin with matters of the National Assembly. Like I said, because at the National Assembly's second ordinary sessions, the Minister of Information and Communication Infrastructure said the government provides a policy that requires 2.5% of the revenue generated from the telecom sector as given to GRTS to cover some of its operation cost. Minister Ibrahim Silla said the Gambia Radio and Television Services generates its income through TV commercials and adverts. So of course we would bring you more details of that in just a moment. So like I said, yeah, so that is of course the Minister of Information and Communications, Ibrahim Silla, who appeared before parliamentarians yesterday to respond concerns and queries of concern from the MPs or the parliamentarians on issues of national development. Of course, he responded on how government supports GRT's operations. So I think that is important because sometimes there are concerns as to how these things work. But of course, also, you know, through TV commercializations and adverts and all that, he gave a clarity on some of the operations of the state on medium. But of course, there's some different, of course, with private-owned media houses also as to the way and how they operate. So the minister was asked about this, so he have given an answer so the Gambians would know how GRTS is supported by the Gambia government. Sometimes, you know, these things do come out in some quarters around in different parts of the country, people are concerned sometimes, when events happen, how sometimes GRTs would not attend to some of the events and they do attend to others, and there should be equality, there should be balance. So knowing that government is the one responsibility, sometimes they chip in, but of course, not sometimes, but I say government would come on and support, because it's a state-owned, it's Gambian thing. We all own GRT, so that is very, very important that the minister clarifies that. Su ko defee rek léegi-léegi ñu ñëw ak yéen ci xibaar bi ñu yaatal ko, kon ni ma ko waxee député yi ñu ngi continuer seen liggéey foofu ci pencum dawra bi, comme niñ ko gisee nag ci li nga xamante ne mooy ci xibaar bu ma indi léegi ñu indi report bi mu gën a yaatu. Ki nga xamante ne mooy ministre bu yoree wàllum communication ci biir réew mi di Ibrahima Silla jàkkaarloo na ak ñi nga xamante ne mooy député yi pour ñu waxtaan wala mu indi leeral ci yenn li nga xamante ci taxawaay bi nga xamante ne nguur gi ñu ngi ko def ci wàllum GRTS ñu leen di doolele wala ñu leen di supporté léegi xam nga ne foog ñu leeral ko, ndax conscience yi dafay am ci loolu tamit nu moo doxee. Su ko defee xam naa ne xibaar boobu nañ ci dellusiwaat ci kanam tuuti incha allah, waaye gannaaw loolu ñu wéy indi rek beneen xibaar. Waxoon naa ko tamit ci affaire liggéey yi, mooy International Labour Day. Am na report bu ci génn, su ko defee ñu dem ak loolu ñu dellusiwaat. We'll move on to our next story, but of course we will come back to the first story later on, because 10 years after the adoption of a historic International Labour Day Organization, ILO, convention that confirmed their labor rights, domestic workers are still fighting for recognition as workers and essential service providers. Now, working conditions for many have not improved in a decade and have been made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a new ILO report. Here's more details of that in this report.
The International Labour Organization report assesses the working conditions of domestic workers 10 years after the adoption of Domestic Workers Convention in 2011. It highlights the progress made over a decade as well as the remaining legal and implementation gaps, and provides guidance on policies that can pave the way to make decent work a reality for domestic workers. As official explains, domestic workers were more vulnerable to the fallout from the pandemic because of long-standing gaps in labor and social protection.
Well, in our new report on domestic workers, the key figures are that there are just over 75 million domestic workers in the world. This is a very substantial part of the workforce, highly feminine workforce. 3/4 of the workforce are women, and extremely high levels of informality. 81% of domestic workers working conditions of informality. And what we're trying to do is to see to what extent we are achieving the goals set in that convention adopted 10 years ago, which, stated simply, are to provide these workers who are real workers like everybody else.
At the height of the crisis, job losses among domestic workers range from 5 to 20% in the most European countries, as well as Canada and South Africa. The COVID-19 pandemic is also a contributing factor on the working conditions that were already very poor, the report says.
What we've seen with the pandemic is that domestic workers have lost their jobs in greater numbers than others, or they've had their working time reduced more than others. So they've been hit harder in numerical terms. But looking underneath those numbers, what does it mean? Well, it can mean that domestic workers, because many of them live in the homes of the people they work for, they may have lost their place to live. They may have lost their home. Many of these workers are migrant workers, so their status within a country may be called into question. They may be stranded. So this is very quickly where the drama, and it's always a drama, of losing your job.
Domestic workers comprise a significant part of the global workforce in informal employment and are among the most vulnerable groups of workers. They work for private households, often without clear terms of employment, unregistered in any book, and excluded from the scope of labor legislation. Currently, there are at least 67 million domestic workers worldwide, not including child domestic workers, and this number is increasing steadily in both developed and developing countries. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Mariama Cham.
All right, Madam Cham reporting there on the International Labour Day new report about, of course, how workers still continue to struggle as far as their status are concerned, and of course the impact also of the COVID-19 on state of workers around the globe, which has been really tough, especially in recent times since the outbreak of the COVID-19. All right, we're moving on. Of course, we go back to matters of the National Assembly, but of course, on a different thing. But stayed with the Minister of Information. Yes, because the Minister of Information and Communication Infrastructure, Ibrahim Asila, said the short-term restructuring strategy to revive Gamtel and Gamcell will cost over $5 million. Now, the Gambia telecommunication company, Gamtel, is the principal communications company of the Gambia. With low-quality service delivery and loss of potential customers, the state-backed company is mapping out ways to repositioning the entity. And here is more details of that by Fatmata Kasim.
Gamcell was established in 2000 as a subsidiary entity of the Gambia Communication Company, Gamtel National GS service for its consumers, voice and data. It was the first operator to provide mobile communication services in the Gambia with a consumer base of about 500,000 subscribers. The National Assembly member for Badibu Ilyasa asked why Gamtel and Gamcell are losing potential customers. The Information Minister, it is because the company has not done any meaningful upgrading since its establishment in 2001. To help address these challenges, a turnaround strategy plan was created in 2019, mainly to maintain its services while improving its quality.
To help address these challenges, the management of Gamtel, through the guidance of its board of directors, has developed a turnaround strategy in 2019, mainly to maintain its services and to improve its quality in meeting the needs and expectations of its customers. This is done through the rehabilitation of the network infrastructure all over the country, which has helped to restore some of the telephone services around the country. Thank you.
The minister was asked a follow-up question by the Ilyasa NAM for the duration it will take to rehabilitate the network. In response, the minister said the network mechanization is ongoing and it should be actualized before the end of the year.
The network modernization project for Gamcell is ongoing. This morning I was briefed that a number of service solutions have already been provided. There is currently a shipment on the way of some of the equipment. I think they have set up a new work plan that should actually be actualized before the end of the year. Now, regarding Gamtel, there is currently the expansion going on regarding the data technology since the liberalization of the gateway, where all the service providers now have a gateway monitored by the Public Utilities and Regulatory Authority, PURA. Gamtel is now expanding its spares in data network by providing internet to homes and also internet to offices. Currently, all the government offices are being connected to the Gamtel infrastructure.
The lawmaker further asked about the total cost of the Gamtel-Gamcell restructuring project. However, the minister couldn't give the exact figure, but estimated it to be around $5 million for only Gamcell and promised to bring the written statement.
I don't know that offhand, but I know that for Gamtel, the medium to short-term investment plan was supposed to cost about $5 million. For the network upgrade and expansion of the broadband infrastructure. And the good thing is, right now, for example, most of the loops are already closed. For example, I mean, if there are problems, say, within the network, you can bypass, you can do a bypass, say from one route to the other. All those loops are closed now, so that was a significant upgrade. What is now left is to have the constituent equipment, like the fiber access terminals and the rest. These are technical terms that will make customers connect to the infrastructure, and those ones are already costed. I can provide a written statement to you on that, how much it will definitely cost the institution.
Gambia's cabinet ministers agreed that the state-backed Teleco Gamtel and its mobile subsidiary Gamcell will be restructured, and share of Gamcell will be subsequently divested. According to Telegraphy, the division was reached after debating the results of a study presented to Cabinet by Minister for Information and Communication Infrastructure Ibrahim Silla and Minister for Finance and Economic Affairs Mamburin Jai. The agreed restructuring plan stipulates that Gamcell will operate under an independent management free from Gamtel's control and influence, while Gamtel will be restructured and depositioned in order to make it more effective and efficient. For iAfrica News, I am Fatoumata Kasim.
Fatoumata Kasim, thank you very much for the report. Yeah, of course, the Gambia government needs over $5 million to resuscitate the country's main, of course, telecommunication company, Gamcell, if you like. Not my words though, but according to the Information Minister Ibrahim Silla, as he told the lawmakers yesterday in Banjul. Well, of course, in recent times, as you heard from the report, Gamcell is seemingly struggling somehow, so government need to pump in money into the institution to get it working again. But for some reasons, it has been taking time for that to happen. But of course, the institution also is mapping out ways to get themselves back on track again. But we hope that will happen, and it very, very soon. Now, from the report, we would move on and, of course, talk on remittances now, because the World Bank has ranked the Gambia as the second largest recipient of remittances in sub-Saharan Africa based on the share of the country's GDP. The development comes as the world marks International Day of Family Remittances, which seeks to highlight the great resilience of migrants workers in the face of economic insecurities. Here's more details of that in this report by Ndesise.
Migrant remittances are recognized globally as a significant medium through which Gambians in the diaspora contribute to the country's development and poverty mitigation. The remittances flows surpass foreign direct investment as the biggest source of financial contribution in many West African countries. Reports from the World Bank reveal that the Gambia is the second largest country benefiting from remittances flow, as the country's capital transfer from remittances stood at over $588 million in 2020. This represents 48% of the country's GDP. Despite progress in access to remittances in sub-Saharan Africa, there remains a huge chunk of people that struggle to receive money sent for them from abroad. As a result, the International Fund for Agricultural Development urged governments and private institutions to invest more in digital infrastructure so as to make transfers easy, especially for those in rural areas.
In today's modern economy, remittances represent the human face of globalization, and the international community needs to work together to not only make it cheaper, but also to make it count more for millions of families and the communities in which they live.
Thousands of Gambians almost every year risk their lives to travel through the Mediterranean Sea to reach European shores in search of greener pasture. In recent years, Gambians have immigrated at a higher rate than every other African nation. According to the International Organization for Migration, migration plays a significant role in Gambian society, as estimated 11,800 Gambians are living abroad. Despite their contributions, some of the migrants are being deported mainly from Germany, as most of them are without proper documents. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Ndesise.
It's a very important one indeed for that matter. Yes, Gambia, of course, registered or ranked as the second beneficiary, or of course, or should I say largest in terms of remittances, recipient of remittances within the sub-region, according to the World Bank report. Well, we all know, of course, the role and the important role the Gambians outside the country continues to play in terms of supporting families back home. That is very, very significant, and we all know how important it is, especially for many people back home here. So it's an essential part that we reflect and know how their contributions continue to play in terms of course, helping many people in this country, but also contributed into the country's GDP also, that worth recognizing. So we say thank you to all of those out there who always things back home and send, of course, in whatever way, back something, of course, send back something back home. So I think that's important. So we say once again, well done to all Gambians out there for not only supporting families, but of course they contribute in a larger scale in what this gets this country moving forward as a nation. su ko defee rek mbokk yi comme ni ngeen ko gisee ci report boobu loolu mu nekk li am solo comme ni ñu koy waxee saa su ne Gambien si nekk ci biti seen taxawaay ci réew mi ñëpp xam nañ ko nu ñoo dimbale famille yu bari ci réew mi loolu ñëpp ñoo ko xam waaye sax yemul ci loolu donte ne ñu ngi jàppale famille yi ak ñeneen ak yeneen mbir tamit nuñ cee dugal ci ay koppar ci biir réew mi loolu nekk na lu yaatu waaye tamit li am solo waaye yemul ci tamit ñu ngi contribute bu baax a baax ci doxalini réew mi ci li nga xamante ne mooy ci xaalis wala ci li ñoo dugal ci réew mi loolu foog naa ne li am solo la pour ñu cee def taxaw seetlu waaye tamit di recognize mooy di wane ne loolu foog naa ne kilifa yi tamit ñu ngi cee bàyyi xel bu baax a baax moo tax léegi foog ñu sooraale leen ci yeneen mbir yi nga xamante ne ñu ngi ko jël ci doxalin ci réew mi daay am solo bu baax a baax loolu mu nekk li am solo comme ni ñu koy waxee saa su ne ñoom foog ñu delloo leen njukkal ndax lu ñuy wax ci ñoom ñëpp xam nañ ko taxawaay bi macha allah ñu ngi leen di gërëm bu baax ci loolu because comme ni ñu koy waxee rek léegi ñu ne picc baa ngi ci kaw waaye xel baa ngi ci suuf mooy lu ñu nekk ci biti yëpp xalaat bi ak xel yëpp mu ngi Gambia ñoom tamit seen contribution ak seen taxawaay fexe ñu bëri fii tey ñu mun a doxal lu bëri ci réew mi am nañ ci taxawaay bu am solo jàppale famille yi mbokk yi ak ñeneen yi nga xamante ne mooy ñu ngi ci réew mi loolu dafa am solo bu baax loolu lii ak tamit nu ñoo gesto ci réew mi loolu bu amee solo tamit réew bi ci boppam ci doxalin bi def see gis boppam tamit bu baax a baax su ko defee gannaaw loolu ñu continuer ba léegi ci programme bi ñu fàttali rek ne yéen a ngi ànd ak li nga xamante ne mooy Good Morning Africa programme bi fii ci Africa TV tey di alxamis yemuk fukki fan ak juróom-ñaar ci weer mi di June su ko defee ñu continuer ñoo dellusiwaat Banjul delluwaat ci National Assembly bi gis naa ne ministre yi surtout ministre bi di Ibrahima Silla ak ñeneen ñi ñu ngi busy woon trop ñëw tontu indi ay leeral ci lu bari li aju ci wàllu mi doxalin réew mi ak nit ñi tamit nu ñoo dundee ci réew mi ndax ñoom lañ ko dénk ñoom lañ ko sas pour tamit ñu fexe ñëpp nekk ci nekkin bu am solo day am léegi ñu dem ñu déglu leen ñoom tamit ci nag doxalin bi fan lañ koo teg ak nuñ ko doxalee ak yenn jafe-jafe ak yenn développement moo ci am loolu dafay am solo bu baax loolu muy am saa su ne ñuy dem foofu noonu ñi nga xamante ñoom ñoo fa teewal nit ñi tamit di leen di laajte ci li nga xamante ne Gambien si am nañ ci conscience bëgg nañ ko xam surtout lu mel ni wàllum luwaas loolu la ñoo ñëw yegg si léegi indi leen ci report gannaaw bi nga xamante ne loolu tamit waxtaan nañ ko ci National Assembly bi moo ci pencum ndaw réew mi ci jafe-jafe yi nga xamante ne Gambien si ñu ngi ko dund ci wàllum luwaas. Now we'll move on to our next story and again we would be going back to the National Assembly because rentals in the Gambia have been discussed and it has been a challenge for many tenants, especially those living in the greater Banjul areas. Now, appearing before lawmakers in Banjul on Wednesday, the Minister of Information and Communication Infrastructure, who of course was a very busy man, who represented the Justice Minister, said plans are underway to draft a rent control bill to make rentals affordable for less privileged people in the country. And here's more of that in this report.
Access to standard and affordable houses in the Gambia has been a concern for many, as rental fees continue to surge, especially in the greater Banjul areas. Most of the tenants revealed that they find it difficult to offer the amount charged by landlords. During the National Assembly's second ordinary session on Wednesday, the National Assembly member for Banjul North, Usman Silla, said the cost of house rent is suffocating many people in the Gambia. The Minister of Information and Communication Infrastructure, Ibrahim Silla, who represented the Attorney General, was asked if the government has any plans to address the issue. In response, Minister Silla said the government is working towards addressing the problem.
Honorable Speaker, the Ministry of Justice is equally concerned with the issue of the hike in house rents. The issue of rent is a cross-cutting social and economic issue. As such, we believe there has to be broad consultation with key government ministries, such as the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs and the Ministry of Lands and Local Government. The Ministry of Justice will consult these key stakeholders and come up with recommendations to Cabinet that would potentially lead to the preparation of a rent control bill.
Ibrahim Silla said these processes cannot be carried out in isolation, raising the need to engage landlords and local government officials. Lawmaker Silla suggested that the government should come up with incentives to enable landlords to offer their houses at a very reasonable price, as well as reducing high tax payment. Minister Silla responded that citizens are first priority of the government.
A tax framework on rented properties that reach certain amounts. Just recently, I had the GRA on the media, actually, different radios and TV stations, sensitizing landlords and ladies about, their rent, their tax obligations collected on rent. But let me say, in general and in broad terms, anything that will ease the conditions of the people of this country, that is the priority of the government of the Gambia, and that's what we are working towards on.
Chibirin Jilan is one of the tenants who spends over $6,000 on rent per month. This, he said, is a very big challenge for him and most of the ordinary citizens, as they earn less than $4,000 per month.
We face a lot of pain on it because
we are all facing the difficulty of rent because landlords now are taking things for granted. Some of them who built their compound within 3 years are charging people to pay 2 rooms and parlor for $5,000 each, which is not fair. And also, this agent stuff is also another reason why rents are expensive. And here in the Gambia, we all know that to earn $5,000 per month is very difficult because you have a family, you need to give lunch to children when going to school, and also you need to provide feeding for the family. This is very difficult on us.
Despite the availability of rent tribunals, landlords and tenants continue to face issues. As a result, much is needed from the government to address the challenges. The National Assembly member for Tumana also suggested that if there are laws regulating rent in the Gambia, there is no need for a new bill, recommending the amendment of those laws. The recent hike of rents in the Gambia has led to many calling on the government to step in and find measures to reduce the skyrocketing high rate, especially for less privileged. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am DCC.
Well, thank you very much. And I, of course, want to believe this is would be one of the, not if not the best, but one of the reporters that I know many people, especially in the Gambia, would want to hear issues of rent been discussed at the level of the National Assembly. Well, deputizing for the Justice Minister there is the Information Minister, Ibrahim Silla, who highlighted some of the steps taken or undertaken by the government to make sure that rental challenges are being looked at. Government would come up with policies that could ease some of the challenges, if not all, but some of the challenges tenants face, of course, in terms of rental and all that in the country. It is one of the most talked about issues in this country. People, complain, lodge complaints every day. What should the government do to remedy some of the challenges tenants faced in this country? So it's going to be a wide discussion. Maybe in another time we're going to expand the discussion around that topic or issue with regards to rental issues in the Gambia, because I know it is a concern for many people in this country. So if the government is thinking along that line to make sure that they would want to come with a policy or a program that would at least look at it in a general perspective, I think that is welcoming, and I only hope it would be one of the fast-tracked developmental program by the Gambia government. I know many would really appreciate that. su ko defee mbokk yi comme ni ngeen ko gisee noonu ci report bi wàllum luwaas léegi-léegi maa ngi koo wax ma ne xam naa ñu bëri ñuy seetaan bu dul ñëpp dañ apprécier bu baax report boobu ne député yi ñu ngi waxtaan wàllum luwaas ci biir réew mi ndax xam nañ ne nu mel jafe-jafe ak lu ñu cee dégg nit ñi di ci joytu buñ demee ba di ko waxtaanee di wax ne tamit nguur gi mu ngi wane ne am nañ ci gis-gis te am nañ ci taxawaay buñ ci bëgg a def pour gis ne yenn jafe-jafe yi nga xamante ne luwaaskat yi ñu ngi koo dund ñu mun koo bu dee mënuñ koo génnee yëpp waaye am luñ ci mën a saytu ba yenn ay mun a wàññeeku loolu dafay am solo. ndax nekk na nag li am solo tamit ñu waxtaanee ko ci réew mi loolu tamit dafa yaatu sax ponk bu yaatu la xam naa du xëj tey ci programme bi waaye ci yeneen jamono incha allah dañ ci xuus bu baax gën koo yaatal waaye am na solo gars yi waxtaanee ko ñu xam ne tamit ñëpp wala ñu bari ñu ngi leen bàyyi xel ci loolu su ko defee ñu wéy wax ci leneen ci programme bi ñu addu ci wàllum International Day of African Child xam ngeen loolu tamit lu xew la at mu nekk dañ koy màggal ci fu ne ci àdduna si te Gambie tamit bokk ci nañ ci ànd ak report den su ko defee ñu ñëwaat dalal ci suñ naataango waxtaan ak moom ci bés bi lan la umba ak tamit yan di yokkute ak lan jafe-jafe la ñu dunda yu mel noonu ci biir réew mi surtout ci wàllum ndaw yi xale yi ak yu mel noonu den su ko defee ñu ñëwaat we'll move on to our next story and report on Child Matters Now, or International Day of African Child. Yes, International Day of African Child is celebrated on the 16th of June every year to encourage people around the world to highlight the importance of improving the education system in Africa. Africa TV gauged the view of the UNICEF country representative on the importance of this day. More on this report by Aisha Jallo.
Historically, the Day of the African Child has been an occasion to reflect on the struggles of children on the continent, but also celebrate progress to fulfill their rights and welfare. Founded on the struggles of Black African children to access education in apartheid-era South Africa and the killing of hundreds of children and youth in the 1976 Soweto uprising, the day presents an opportunity to assess the situation of children and recommit ourselves to their development. Across the continent, children are raising their voices demanding their rights, including the right to birth registration and access to quality education. But while some are being heard, many children remain without a voice and a platform to speak up. In fact, they are being left without a seat on their throne of development. On the significance of the Day of African Child, UNICEF representative in the Gambia, Jonathan Lewis, buttressed on why actions are needed from leaders.
Which the Organization of African Unity, now the African Union, has established as one of the official landmark milestone dates to celebrate here on the continent. And it is a date that every single African country is celebrating, the 16th of June, in order to take stock the very important achievements that many countries have been able to garner in the area of development, survival, and protection of children's rights, but at the same time to register what are some of the concerns that children themselves, through their own voices, are telling African governmental and other leaders that they still need so that they may be able to live a life free of violence, a life where every child is able to go to and complete primary and secondary schooling, and a life full of opportunities.
It could be reflected in June 1976. Thousands Black students
from Soweto, South Africa, protested the poor quality of their education by marching on the streets. The education system of Africa was riddled with systematic discrimination against black students. The students were segregated based on their race and they're subjected to an inferior education schools. Over a span of 2 weeks, the students marched and were subsequently shot by the security forces. Hundreds of students were killed and the march came to be known as the Soweto Uprising. The International Day of the African Child was created in 1991 to honor the people who participated in the Soweto Uprising on June 16, 1976. Reporting for iAfrica News, Aisha Jallo.
Well, 16th of June is set aside each year to celebrate or commemorate the International Day of African Child, as reported there by Aisha Jallo. Well, each year, of course, I think it's a moment of reflection as far as this day is concerned. So we're going to widen the discussion with the very reporter who, of course, you just had there, talking to or bringing some very important matters as far as the day is concerned. Aisha Jallo joins me now for us to discuss on this day, the International Day of African Child. Aisha, good morning, and thank you very much for coming on GMA, this Good Morning Africa program, and we are very much to have you today to talk about International Day of African Child. But first, say hi to our viewers.
All right, thank you so much, Amadou. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning. And good morning to my beautiful viewers out there. I am Aisha Jallo, and I'm happy to be here today.
Fantastic. We're equally very much happy to have you. Just listening to the report that you have done and the African International Day African Child. So you talk about the African child and of course the day itself, but of course an education as well. But first, tell us about the day. What is it all about? What is the day is all about as far as International Day of African Child is concerned?
The name itself, International Day for the African Child, is something that is really big.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the African child, who is the African child and why do we use this specific day for the African child? An African child in legal terms, a child is a minor.
Yeah.
And when we talk about a minor, these are people that are below the age of 18.
Sure.
So people that are below the age of 18 downwards, these people are so young and very vulnerable. Therefore, their rights are supposed to be protected.
Indeed.
And this is why this day come up. It is a day to recognize children across the continent, which is Africa, and also reflect on the issue that happened to some of the students that died during their march past in South Africa during the apartheid period. We are all aware that during the apartheid period, children were not given their right to education. Their mandate were not up to expectation. At some point, they deemed it necessary to come up and do a march past to bring up their voices to that society that they needed their right to education was being trampled on, and then it needed to they needed that right back.
They needed the
so
freedom,
it was exactly it was rather unfortunate that hundreds of children, black African children, were killed.
Absolutely.
And this is so tragic. And I think this is why that this happened in June 1976. This is the reason why in 1991 African Union deemed it necessary to honor those children that stood up for their pride, that stood up for their right to education, and then it was trampled on. That was why this day is brought up.
Brilliant. You talk about the appetite, and I think there was where many children, like you said, were killed in a broad daylight. Well, that was something else. Now, of course, you talk about the African child, you talk about Africa, and of course, you talk about Gambia, because Gambia, of course, is part of the African, everybody knows that. Now, I mean, now, in a Gambian context, how far have we gone as a country in fulfilling, this day in the country, in celebrations, in making sure that children recognize that they are protected, they are being supported in achieving their desires, in education in particular?
Thank you so much. We've all know in the Gambia, looking at during the past years, there were not much schools in the Gambia to make sure that their right to education was given to them. So looking at the statistics from 2010 to 2018, we will see that the rate of schools in the Gambia, primary school, has increased from 68% to 78%. I think this is a milestone. And this is why nowadays we're seeing so many Gambian children are going to school and automatically their right to education is being fulfilled, which this day is all about. But like you made mention, some of the challenges that we're facing in the Gambia for children cannot be overemphasized. We are seeing,
in as much as there are successes, but there are also challenges
exactly
as well.
For them going to school, obviously we're seeing what the government is doing, that they're trying so hard that so many children in the Gambia are now going to school. If you want to compare it to the past decade and now, the milestone is just brilliant. But some of the challenges that we're also facing cannot be overemphasized, like I made mention. Like we will see in the Gambia, child labor is an issue. Most of the time we will see children, their rights have been, unsafe migration is also an issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And looking at the percentage of dropout these days has also minimized. So this is also something that we should be proud of. But then one of the things that are also not encouraging, this is their right to birth registration. It's something that we're not so much concerned about in the Gambia. Because we will see the statistics have shown that only 32% of the Gambian child has this registration birth.
Which is a concern.
Exactly, this is a concern because it is a right.
Not long ago, the health minister highlighted that government, parliament, that government want to come up with a policy, sort of a mandatory for every parent to make sure that their child are registered, I think
if you look at the rate, 32% is very, very small.
It is.
Therefore, if you don't have the birth registration, you become invisible. So this at some point, exactly, government will not know the exact amount of children that we have that they are supposed to cater for in issue for educational and when it comes to issue of healthcare and so on. These are things that at the end of the day, people will come out and say the government is not doing this, the government is not doing that, while at the end of the day, they don't know the exact amount of children that we have in our community due to their right to birth registration is being deprived from them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's better late than never that government is coming up with such policy, but this could have been done much earlier than now, so that parents would have been encouraged to make sure that their child are registered immediately after birth. As you said, this is one of the discouraging areas we face as a country as far as child matters or children matters are concerned. Now, of course, you also talked to the UNICEF country rep, country representative on this day. Tell us about that. How did it go? How was your conversation on this day?
Yes, my conversation with the UNICEF representative in the Gambia, who was Jonathan Lewis, he made mention on the importance of this particular day, making mention of the African Union on how they bring on a stag of the Ghana to make sure that this day is being celebrated, the achievements that they have made so far within the continent, and some of the struggling issues that children are facing, and what government needs to do. Like I made mention, birth registration was one of the things that he made mention, and unsafe migration, children are migrating anywhere, and these are things that we need to put a stop to. These were some of the issues that he highlighted, and giving assurance to the continent at large that they're doing all they can to make sure, most especially for him being the rep for Gambia, to make sure that the rights to education for children are not tampered with, and then their healthcare, their survival, to make sure that they have a safe survival within this environment. Basically, that was all we talked about.
Well, that was a good one. It appears you had a very good conversation with him on this day, the importance of the day, especially in the context of very own societies and communities as a country. Sometimes they are always concerned as to how children struggled around around the country in some areas. So you talk about, of course, the issue of migration and other issues, which is very, very important. So as the world, of course, including Gambia, celebrates another year, each year, 16th June, it's been celebrated. Probably, what should we look forward to? Of course, here maybe against next year, probably in the next 2 years, 5 years in the Gambia. Do you foresee changes in terms of supporting children and some of the gaps that we face in challenges, or in terms of the challenges that we face as a country? Because I want to believe that more needs to be done to improve the condition and status of the children in this country.
Yes, thank you for that. Well, I believe that changes will be made, because if you look at the statistics of dropout is now like so decreasing, and then this is actually a milestone for the government, and then I believe as time goes on, every child in the Gambia would be, their right to education will be fulfilled, and we know what happens when every child have the right to education and it has been fulfilled. Education, we know is very, very fundamental, and if that happens, if every child has their right to education, then at the end of the day, the Gambia would go to the next level, because we already know that they are the ones that we need to invest in, and if we invest in them, that is when we will see the Gambia become what we want it to be. Obviously. Well,
as the saying goes, education is key to success, so it is a fundamental pillar in any country's crusade for development, so it's important. But also, as far as labor issues are concerned, that is an area also I think that need to be looked at. But I think where you have done justice to this topic and given us the important and the essence of celebrating this day, and some of the strides as a country that we have made as far as supporting children or the child matters are concerned. We want to thank you so much for coming. I hope you keep following this development of children in this country. Thank you very much. And what will be your final message to maybe to the authorities, government, if you like, parents, to keep supporting the children, and especially on the birth registration, which I think is a concern, like for everyone. Like we need to improve on that as a country.
Yes, thank you so much, Amadou. My last words are not going to be much, but to first of all congratulate the government, because we are seeing the difference in gap with the statistics of children that have been, let's say, the dropout rate, and then we are seeing that is decreasing, and that is actually a milestone. And then we are also urging them to add more on what they're doing to make sure that their educational right, children's educational right, are not tampered with, and to also send a message to every parent out there in the Gambia to tell them that it is very, very important for them to make sure that their children's right to birth registration should be given to them. They should not deprive it from them, because if they do, that particular child will not be visible to the government, and you are depriving the child from other rights, like a right to healthcare, right to survival in our society. And this is something that we need to focus on. Children are who we are supposed to invest in, because they are our future. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Some wise advice there from Aisha Jallo on the International Day of African Child, especially on parents and the government as well. As we move forward as a country, these are some of the areas that need to be looked at, as he said. Aisha, thank you very much once again for coming. It was a pleasure sharing with you on this platform, and of course on this day as well. And well, we look forward to next year, God willing. 16th of June is the day. So I hope you take your calendars. Don't forget, our children need to be supported, to better their standards in education, health, whatever it is, because it's a right. All right. So on that note, we of course have to bring this edition to an end now. But of course, we had some very other plans that could not possible, but we will come back tomorrow with something more, inshallah, God willing. We'll keep it always tight here with you, the viewers. So once again, thank you so very much for the pleasure of your company, always for being there at this time from 9 a.m. to any time when we end the program. We appreciate your efforts, your loyal, and your support as well, and contributions to the program. We'll be back for the week's ending edition. That's tomorrow, God willing, right here on Africa TV. Well, mbokk yi ñu ngi leen di gërëmaat bu baax ci ni ngeen di ànd ak ñun saa su ne ci programme bi. Amaana amoon na leen lu ci waroon a rax waaye wala ñu dugal ko ci waaye xam naa ne comme gars yi nuñ ko wax rek li jiw jeexu rek jógu fa incha allah suba nañ dellusiwaat ci yeneen ñu gën koo yaatal bu baax a baax ñu gërëmaat leen beneen yoon ci safo bi ak ci kolte bi rendez-vous bi suba lay doon mu nekk édition bu mujj ci week bi ñu yaatal bu baax nag ci lu bari incha allah jërë ngeen jëfati yàlla nañu ànd ak jàmm bye bye.